How do you save hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on a professional backdrop for your portrait photography? Being a portrait photographer can be really expensive, especially with all the cameras and the lights and the backgrounds. And in fact, a professional background for your portraits can run you well over $1,000. I'm Jason Olsrud, and you're watching The Creative Portrait. All right, so if you don't have any loose $100 bills just stuffed in your pockets to burn, stay tuned because I'm going to show you how you can save thousands of dollars on a professional background by doing it in Photoshop. All right, real quick before we get started, if you like this video, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, and if you want more tutorials just like this, head on over to my Patreon page at The Creative Portrait. All the links are in the description below. Now, let's get into this.
All right, so here we are with Kathy, and we are going to clean up this background just a little bit. I'll show you how I do that, but also then I'm going to drop in a new background to overlay this one, all right? Because I like the tone of this one, but I'm going to drop one in to overlay it. So basically what we're going to end up with is this type of background, something that's really nice and clean, toned with the rest of the image, that type of thing. And then we're going to give it some character as well. So when we look at the sample that I have here already created, we have Kathy over here, the main layer here of her, and then we have an exposure layer, a color fill layer, and then our texture layer, and then Kathy again as well. So we're going to go ahead and start in. So this is the original before I did any artwork to her. As you can see, we did some artwork on her neck. We did some liquefying to tone her down or give her some, I guess, curves and that type of thing. And then we're going to come in here and let me real quick show you how I'm just going to copy that. So now I'm on the original layer. I'm going to add a layer above it. And then with my S clone stamp, so S on the keyboard, I'm just going to come in here and I want to make sure that the opacity is high and flow is high, because all I'm really doing is trying to cover up the tape here on this backdrop that I have, which is a V flat, and I love my V flat. And so I'm just coming in here and just basically repairing this a little bit so I can come in and overlay something. I'm not too technical with it. As long as it looks decent, I'm cool. And that's about it. All right. So then you can come in here, and I don't necessarily like all this dark or light over there, but I'm just going to tone that down a little bit, just like that. And that's looking pretty decent right there. All right. So that's basically all I do to fix that background. I'm not too concerned about how it doesn't look really good, because we're going to overlay some things to it as well. So I'm just going to click off of those, go back to our one that we're ready with here. And so now that I have this layer here, I'm going to select another layer. So copy, Command J to copy it, or Control J. And then I'm going to come in here and make a select subject. So the select subject on Photoshop is really, really good way to cut out or to extract an object, especially in this case, because we have a nice clean background and we have, for the most part, we have a good separation between our subject and the background. It tends to, if there's not good separation, if it's a really busy background on a really busy subject, Photoshop has a little bit of problems, but for this, I think it works really well. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Select Subject and let Photoshop work its magic here. And so that's pretty good. I'm really kind of happy with that. Right down here, we could go in here and knock this out, but I'm not too concerned about it. I'm just going to go ahead and leave it and then come back here. I'm going to leave the hairs. I'm really good with just this right here. I know this is going to seem weird, but and then we hit the mask, and so we put a layer mask on it. And I'm just going to come up here and feather it to about 6, roughly, this layer mask. So as long as you're selecting the layer mask, You have your properties for your layer mask, and you can go up and feather it and do whatever you want with it. So now that we have our subject selected here, I can go ahead and click on our other image down here and turn it back on, because this is really, we could call this our background layer. And then we have our subject layer here. So we just have Kathy. So I'll just title it Kathy. And so down here, now we're going to start working on the background. And then I can bring this guy here, my background, over and lay it in. Now I can't give you this background because I purchased these, but you can choose any background. It doesn't matter. We can even do it without that. We can paint in one if we want to. And then I'm just going to come in here and hit, I don't know, I'm just going to look at different textures that I like. So you can go in here and look at that. So I'm digging that one, and an overlay texture is kind of cool. I'm digging that. So I'm just going to bring that tone down, or that opacity down a little bit, because I don't want it so strong. I don't want it to overemphasize the subject that we have in our portrait. Our background should be a very subtle way to bring our eye to our subject. It should not bring our eye away from the subject. So it shouldn't be that painful. So I'm just going to come in here and knock that down a little bit. And I'm digging it right around the 40-ish area. And then I'm going to go ahead and add another layer above it. And I'm just going to add a color layer in. So this is where I'm going to get my real tones from this layer here. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to pick a tone that's similar to this wood down here, because I really like that, I guess it's a sepia tone. I don't really like sepia, but it's, you know, tending that way. So I'm going to go ahead and hit color, my layer, my solid color layer. And then I'm just going to find a tone that's very similar to that. So let's just go right there for right now. That's good. And then I'm just going to come up here with our color fill layer, and I'm going to give it a blend mode of color. And then I can just start toning that down or bringing that down. And so that's really where we're starting to pull that color in from our subject area. So from her hair, her skin, and these pieces of wood here, we can bring in that same tone to the background and kind of make everything blend really nicely. So if I don't like that tone, that's okay. I can come up here, and then I can select something from her hair, see if I like that better. From there, from her skin, and then I can come down here and select it from that piece of wood down there. So, and then we say, let's bring our opacity up so we can bring more tone into that background. That's getting too much there when we get up into the 20s. So probably around the 17. We'll just say 17 at this point. All right, so we have a nice background going. Now we can add in some, a way to bring our eye more into the subject here. It's very flat, so it's the same basic tone all the way around. I want to bring it into our subject here. So I'm going to go ahead and add a exposure layer. And then with that exposure layer, I'm just going to bring that exposure down a little bit. I'm not worried about bringing it too far down, because I can fiddle with the opacity to bring it back if I want. So I'd rather go too far, and then I'll deal with it later. So that's pretty good right there. And then I'm going to hit my brush tool, and it's feathered really good. And then I can just come in here with our black and just start painting that out there. And that's just going to bring our eye back to our subject a bit here. And let's see where we're at here. Let's turn it on and off. So that's looking pretty good. I like that really good right there. So that's really how I create this background, this textured background from what it was before. So basically from that, a V flat, a gray V, or this is a black V flat, but when you're photographing a subject on it, usually comes out a bit gray unless you have a low light situation. This was more of a brighter situation. We were using natural light from the window to light her. Turned out really great. But I don't let this distract me. You know, when I'm doing the photography, I don't let this distract me. As long as I got a good background here like this, I'm really good with it, because I know I can artwork this out and drop in my own backgrounds, as you can see here. Now, if you want to add more texture to your background, that's super easy. So above our texture layer that we have here, I can go in and I can add another layer. And let's say I want to bring in some more tones from the skin. So I want to bring a little bit more, let's say lighter over here, and we can darken it over here. So if I want it lighter on this side, I'm basically going to hit my brush tool, and I want to go to my brush selections here, and I'm just going to choose this one here. I think it comes with Photoshop. I'm not exactly sure. I know I didn't buy it or download it, so it must come with Photoshop. And then I'm just going to come in here and add some shaping to it so we can get some scatter and get it to act more like a paintbrush. And so then I'm going to come in here and I just want to highlight, let's say, part of the hair there. And then I'm just going to come in and let's go down and let's bring our opacity down. Something a little bit more reasonable here. So something like that. Just like that. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to blur it. So I'm going to give it a blur on this. Let's see, filter. And a Gaussian blur. And we can come up to whatever. I just want it to look kind of like a mush paint, you know. And then I'm going to come in here to our blend mode and I can select something that makes more sense. Let's see. So that's dark, getting dark. So we can come up here. And color dodge is probably my favorite. It's not too harsh. And then if I want, I can bring it out just a little bit right there, and I can tone that down just a little bit, just like that. Good. And then I can add another layer above it and hit my brush tool, and I can come in here to a dark, that dark brown there. And then you can just come in here and give it some nice texture in here, just like that. And I'm just tapping and doing that type of thing. I don't want it to look consistent. I don't want it to look like I'm actually trying to do something. I want it to look like somebody painted, like this is an Oliphant background. All right, so there we go. And then I'm just going to go in and give it an overlay. Soft light generally works pretty good. And then I can bring that opacity down like that. And that's looking pretty decent there. It's getting some nice textures in it. And then I'm going to go back to my, I'm going to go, since I've already blurred it, I'm going to go ahead and add another layer. And with my brush tool, I'm just going to select something from her hair here. And then I'm just going to come in here. Let's go skin tone there and just come in here like this. Pretty much like that. You can make it smaller. Just give it a little bit of flavor around there, if you will. And then I'm going to go ahead and blur that. And I'm going to blur this a little bit more. So the bigger your brush, you need to blur just a little bit more to give it that same kind of vibe. And then I'm going to go ahead and drop this to a color. Let's see what we got here. You know, I'm not minding the lighter color blend mode. And then I'm just going to drop that down in opacity. And your opacities are going to be very subtle. And so I'm down to a 12 here and I'm digging that a lot more. And then I'm going to come up here to my, since I've added these textures in a little bit with painting in, I'm going to go ahead and change my exposure layer and bring it down just a little bit more to draw that eye more towards the subject. So what that is doing is basically it is darkening these areas that I just lightened by painting them. And so I wanted to darken them just a little bit more. And this is looking really, really nice. I'm really liking this background. So you can get a unique, different background every time by just adding these little, textures and painting in some texture on your own. And every single background you have can be uniquely different. And this is kind of why I like using, backgrounds over actual backgrounds where you're stuck with what you have. Now, if you're doing volume, you got to use the textured background. This is not something that you could necessarily do a lot of volume with, but this gives you a very unique fine art looking portrait that you'll never see anywhere else. The background you'll never see anywhere else. Anyway, that's how I create background texture layers on my contemporary portraits.
All right, so how cool was that? I love how these transformations take place from beginning to the end. And that's why I post so many of these on my website. And I particularly loved how this transformation happened from a plain background to a really cool model background that looked like you spent thousands of dollars on it, but it was actually free. Now, this technique can be used literally on any portrait that you create. As long as you have a relatively plain background, you can go in and do overlays and painting and modeling all on your own. And once you do it a few times, it gets really, really quick. Now, don't forget, hit the thumbs up if you like this video, subscribe, and head on over to my Patreon page at patreon.com/The Creative Portrait. All right, so that's it for today's video. I'm Jason Alsred, and I'll see you next time on The Creative Portrait.